My name is Natalia Kucirkova. I work as professor and director of the International Center for EdTech Impact. At the center, we work with a number of EdTech providers who want to increase the impact of their solutions. And that means also preparing them for various certifications, various ways of demonstrating that they meet certain standards and benchmarks. So it is a pleasure that today I can welcome our colleagues from ISTE and 1EdTech. The two organizations play a vital role in shaping how the field thinks about quality, but also interoperability and responsible innovation in educational technology. Through standards, frameworks, and certification processes, ISTE and 1EdTech help define what high-quality digital learning should look like. It is about being pedagogically sound, technically reliable, secure, and aligned with educational goals. And at the same time, we know that not all EdTech products currently meet these benchmarks, and that the sector is highly uneven in its design and evaluation practices. And this is why we are here today and why we are working in this space. We want to ensure that certifications are not only about compliance, but also that they really can function as a pathway towards higher standards across the ecosystem. So we look forward to the conversation today about how all EdTech organizations can move collectively towards stronger and evidence-informed standards. We'll start with a presentation by Erin Dowd, who is the Senior Program Manager at ISTE Seal. Will tell us more about how ISTE works with certifications and what to expect when it comes to the certification process with ISTE Seal. So Erin, I'll hand over to you, and after you will hear from 1EdTech. But first is ISTE and Erin.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalia. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me just go ahead and get my slides up here. There we go. Okay, so hi, everyone. Again, my name is Erin Dowd, and I lead the ISTE Seal program, which is our product evaluation program at ISTE ASCD. A little bit about me, a little bit of my background. I've been with ISTE ASCD for a little bit over 3 years, but I am a former classroom teacher, curriculum coach. I've worked in EdTech as a curriculum and education strategy director. I've consulted for large and small EdTech companies, and my education work has taken me all over the world to countries including the Netherlands, India, China, and Honduras. And now I lead the ISTE Seal program, and we focus on positively impacting EdTech quality through evaluating and helping improve products for learners around the world. And we bring research into practice. And we're also known for our conference that we have every year at the end of June. This year it will be in Orlando, Florida. And we bring together educators, leaders, and EdTech practitioners and providers from all over the world. And maybe I will see some of you there. But in my time today with you, I want to share what ISTE ASCD is doing around product validations and how we're helping to ease the burden on schools regarding EdTech decisions. And we'll talk about the ISTE Seal, the EdTech Index, and how it's all connected to product evaluation. So I like to start with this image because it really kind of sets the tone for the challenges that we're solving and how the seal and other validations can address these challenges. So we'll start with the problems. On the left here, that's the image. We have educators, decision makers, product providers. They're all trying to make sense of what can be a very messy system. I come from the US perspective, but choosing the right EdTech, no matter how streamlined the processes are, no matter where you are in the world, it's challenging. There are so many products out there, and there are challenges around figuring out what the best ones are. And so particularly for navigating the world of EdTech for educators and decision makers, it can be very overwhelming, especially if there are educators with limited technology experience, to understand what good tech actually means for them. But even with tech experience, they have to sift through product claims, countless sales pitches, trying to figure out what's going to work best for their students and the teachers that they employ. It's challenging to select, to implement, and then to effectively use these EdTech tools. It's not just about choosing the tool, it's about that whole process involved. And then product providers have their own set of challenges, right? So while this challenge is being addressed now, historically, EdTech products were designed and built without educator input. The needs of teachers and students were not being addressed. But even with educator input and hiring educators to your product teams, these products may not be selling or designing for the end user. That's another challenge with EdTech products, right? You have administrators, you have parents, you have teachers, you have students. The end users are different from the purchasers. So that adds another layer of complexity. It can also be challenging for EdTech providers to understand what's happening in schools. Our experiences when we were in school a long time ago are not the same experiences that students are having today. And it's difficult to know what is going to drive impact across the board. And one reason, especially from a US perspective, contexts vary so widely across states, districts, and sometimes even within schools. It makes product design very, very challenging. And also, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lack of guidance around quality. And so what does good mean? How do you know when something is good for education? And a lot of times educators and decision makers are relying on word of mouth. What's the school down the street using? And, they implement things that way. But we are addressing these problems as an organization, and many organizations are trying to solve these problems and make things easier on all of the stakeholders involved. And so we move from left to right with validations like the ISTE seal. And the ISTE seal and others, they create clear signals to show quality, clear frameworks, clear evaluation tools to show this is what quality means and this is why it's good. And so product validation helps the industry as a whole because it's easier to distinguish products that have met these quality requirements. And, to see those that have not, or those that are not willing to go through the product evaluations. It really can cut through the noise. So I'm going to talk specifically now about the components of the ISTE seal and how it was designed and developed. We focus mainly on usability and digital pedagogy through the lens of the educator in the classroom. So products who earn an ISTE seal are evaluated on the 5 dimensions that you see here, and also the ISTE standards. And so each dimension represents a different section of the review that we provide for products. And so I'll just break down what each of them is in kind of an overview. So dimension 1 focuses on the general user experience. Does the product work the way it's supposed to work or how the company says it's supposed to work? We look at the interface design, the login process, search functionality, all of those sorts of things. Dimension 2 connects how content is organized on a page and how the learning experiences are designed. So we look at things like learning outcomes, goals, content chunking. It's basically that instructional design component of building a product, particularly a curriculum product. Dimension 3, we look more closely. This is connected to our ISTE standards. We focus on quality learning experiences. Dimension 4 is inclusivity. So we look at both accessibility functionality and then also opportunities for diverse representation. So can students see themselves in the product? Does this product engage them in ways that make sense to them? And dimension 5, we focus on assessment and data. So we look at not only the assessments that students are experiencing, but also the data that is pulled from those learning experiences that teachers can use to then make informed decisions. And then finally, we have the ISTE standards that focus on areas that help students thrive in an evolving technological landscape through student-driven learning. And so this is where we push the envelope a little bit, where we push our, our tech products to show that they're doing more than multiple choice. They're doing more than just having students click through and demonstrate skills, that they're actually provided with choice. They're solving problems. They're engaging with each other in collaborative ways. So where did this framework come from? Well, it didn't just come out of the air. It wasn't, it evolved from just people sitting in a room and deciding, oh, I think we should have these different pieces. It came from years of research. So in our ISTE ASCD team, we are lucky to have an in-house research team. And so several years ago, they set out on a mission to determine what makes a product teacher ready. And what I mean by that is, can you put this product in front of students and teachers? Does it work well? And does it represent high quality product? So this framework is a result of years of research, of focus groups and interviews and literature reviews and all sorts of things to pull together what the components are that make a product usable within a learning environment. And so that's where those dimensions came from. But we further break down those dimensions into what we call indicators and look for us to get really granular and really specific about what it means to be usable and have quality digital pedagogy. So there's just a couple examples here that show two of our indicators. One, we start with value proposition. So does the product deliver what it's saying that it does? Is it good for teachers? Is it good for students? Does it impact the learning environment in some way, or is it just another product? So we look at that first and foremost. And then another example here is login. We get really, really specific about the login experience. Is it easy for teachers and students to log in? Excuse me. And each dimension has a different number of indicators. Dimension 4, inclusivity, is the smallest of the bunch. But I will share the application guide with you a little bit later that breaks down all of the different indicators and all of the different areas that we focus on. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, so this framework was created not just for our product evaluation, but we also have a public-facing tool that educators can use to evaluate products themselves. We freely provide this application guide. We want products to use it to help them with their product road mapping. A lot of times companies will complete a self-assessment using the framework before they apply for the full seal process. But the ISTE seal kind of takes it further with the full vetting and the full certification that lasts for 2 years. Okay. But the ISTE seal is not the only organization that has a product validation, as I'm sure many of you know. There are many validations out there, and here are just some of the examples on the screen right now. But this is important that there are many, because there's no silver bullet. There's no one size fits all in terms of product evaluation. Each of these certifications or validations looks at something different. The ISTE seal covers, like I said, usability, digital pedagogy. Other badges, you're going to hear from Gill in a little bit about what 1EdTech does. Very technical, very focused. It allows, by having these different validations though, it allows the decision makers to determine what they need to focus on. Maybe they're vetting a product, they need to just focus on, privacy in the beginning. And then later on, they can focus on, okay, let's look at the curriculum pieces. Let's look at, inclusivity and accessibility. Or maybe they have different teams that look at those different areas. That helps out as well. But the more badging a product has, the more external evaluation and validation that it's gone through. And that really helps decision makers see the difference between products. And so the goal as a provider would be to earn a validation in each of these 5 areas. But where did these come from, these 5 areas? Well, and what happens with all the badges? That's the other thing. Companies earn these badges. Where are they? They're floating out in the universe here. How can decision makers find information? and use it to inform how they bring EdTech products into their schools. Well, that's another challenge that we are solving in a couple of ways. And one is through bringing together organizations like 1EdTech to determine the most essential elements of a product to evaluate for use in schools. And so we came together to determine 5 quality indicators, and you can see those here: safe, interoperable, evidence-based, usable, and inclusive. And we kind of organize the different validations around those different areas. And you can see the seal covers 3 of those 5 based on the different elements of the framework. So they fit into different areas of quality, and others can be more specialized. Some also cover different areas, but it was a big thing for all of these organizations to get together and say, okay, these are the areas to focus on. This is how we help make things easier for educators. And so the badges themselves can be found on the EdTech Index. And so as a product earns a seal or a badge, they're displayed and searchable by educators and decision makers. And so on the EdTech Index, educators can go on, they can search for products, they can create curated lists, they can compare different products, and they can also see which validations have been earned. And you can see in the case of BrainPop, they have check marks for all 5 quality indicators. And if you click into any one of these, here's the example here for evidence-based, you can see all of the different validations that they've earned. Not every product is in that particular category, right? And so it's easy for educators to see how much external validation that a product has had. But if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend that you check out the edtechindex.org. So it's a place for educators, it's a place for product providers. You can set up a product listing for no cost. And those are just some of the things that we're doing at ISTE ASCD to positively impact EdTech quality. And I think there'll be some time for questions at the end if you have them.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Erin. Thank you for the work that ISTE does. We appreciate the partnership. And now we'll hear from Gill, Gill Ferrell, who is the director of 1EdTech Europe. And she'll tell us a little bit more about how 1EdTech approaches certifications and the work you have been doing in this space for some time now as well, just like ISTE being an important player in the space. So go ahead, Jill, please share your screen.
Thank you. Thanks, Natalia. And thank you very much, Erin, for giving a great introduction as to how our organisations work together and deal with different bits of the puzzle. I hope you're seeing those slides as full screen now. Let me know if not. So I'm Gill Ferrell. I'm delighted to be with you. I am, as Natalia said, Exec Director for the 1EdTech Consortium in Europe. And I live and work in Southwest France. My background is probably more years than I'd care to admit to in EdTech, mainly in higher education. So 1EdTech itself, it's a global community. We're a standards organisation. We're set up as a non-profit consortium, and on the slide, we tell you what we see as the value of implementing open standards in the EdTech ecosystem. It's all about reducing friction and barriers and making life better for learners and teachers. So we're global. We have regional centres. Europe is just one of them. We're set up in many parts of the world. And we are fundamentally a membership organisation, although most of our outputs are actually openly available for use worldwide. So just a few facts and figures. We have over 1,600 members globally, and I'll say a little bit more about the composition of the membership in a minute. The statistic probably most pertinent to the topic of today's webinar is that we've evaluated and certified over 1,300 EdTech products. We've got members headquartered in 35 countries. That's actually a fairly meaningless statistic, really, because our members operate far more widely. We have education providers such as International Baccalaureate that deliver education in over 19 countries. And we have technology providers such as Microsoft and Google who operate in many more than that. So there are literally billions of transactions per year that are facilitated by these underpinning standards. But probably the most interesting statistic of all is the number of people who are involved in our working groups. It's just under 10,000. That's not quite the most up-to-date figure. We're actually a very, very small organisation in terms of our core staffing. There are only about 50 of us worldwide. And our role is to coordinate and facilitate the activities of our member. So we're very much member-led, and we like to say that our standards work for everyone because we work with everyone. And I think the number and diversity of members active in our working groups is really a testimony to that. So we're fairly unique in terms of the public-private collaboration that we represent. So in numbers terms, then technology providers make up around half of that membership of 1,600, and they range from everything to all of the household names in EdTech through to startups, scale-ups, and open source communities. Very much part of our grouping, certainly in Europe. And in terms of education providers, we're right across the spectrum of lifelong learning. So members might be people like ministries of education, school authorities, universities, higher education, alliances, and professional networks. And together we're fostering the growth and development of an open and trusted EdTech ecosystem. So Erin was talking very much about looking in depth at particular products. We're looking very much at how they actually work together in a learning system. If anybody doesn't know what I mean by open standards, interoperability standards, it's a bit like the difference between having a generic USB-C cable, as we use in Europe, or having to buy a different charger for every single appliance. Or similarly, if you have a flashlight that takes AA batteries, you could take that to Mexico, Japan, anywhere you can think of, and you can buy AA batteries that would work in your device. But moving data between EdTech products hasn't always been that simple. And what the 1EdTech community has done over the last 25 years is develop a range of standards that serve the learning life cycle. So in short, our standards do three main things. They connect tools and platforms. They help manage student data in a way that's secure and privacy safe. And they facilitate recognition of learning through verifiable digital credentials. And in the center of the circle here, there are some cross-cutting themes around accessibility, privacy, and security that run through all our work. And the value of this ecosystem approach is that it allows education providers in any part of the world, and Erin's already talked about how different some of these contexts are, but they can develop their own learning ecosystem using their preferred tools. So the standards give you plug and play technology, so you can use the tools that best meet your learners' needs and make them work effectively together. So that's the ecosystem side of things. And it's very much our members who define the need for a standard, establish what it should do, and the rules that govern it. once the standards are created, then they're released openly for anyone in the world to use. And that openness is our real strength, but it also means that any technology provider anywhere could say they're using our standards and could claim to comply with them. And this is where the certification comes into play in terms of providing independent verification that the standard has actually been applied correctly. And Erin mentioned that we're technical. How we do that element of certification is really by getting into the weeds of how the systems actually work and what's going on under the bonnet. We refer to our approach as trusted apps, which is a generic term for a suite of different tools and resources. So the diagnostic suite is a set of conformance and testing tools that the technology providers use to validate their product. Certification is issued when a product passes validation, and certified products are displayed in our trusted apps directory, and sometimes they're passed as data feeds to other partners such as ISTE. And then education provider members can curate the apps in their own that they have in their ecosystem in their own personalized trusted apps dashboard. And I'll say a little bit more about those in a second. So the ability to run your product through our testing suite and actually obtain a trusted app certificate is a member benefit. So anyone can use the standards, but only members can get certified. Generally, they've already realized a lot of benefit before they get to this badge and this certification, because the access to the conformance and testing suite saves them an enormous amount of time on integration. So members report that this can be by a factor of thousands, that integrations that previously took weeks of effort can be done in a few hours. And we've done a lot of work in recent months to bring our developer tools together into a much more user-friendly portal and to try and make adoption easier for right across the market. So I said earlier that certification gives confidence that the standard's been adopted correctly, and that's a win-win for both technology providers and end users, because if it did happen that we'd certified 2 products and they didn't interoperate correctly, that becomes our problem to solve, not the customers, not the suppliers, but our tech team actually would need to get on and solve that. And our validation checks have to be done annually to ensure that there haven't been any upgrades or changes to the product that actually impact the interoperability of them. So there's a certification route for every one of our core interoperability standards. And we also offer some self-assessment rubrics for some of the cross-cutting topics that I talked about. So particularly accessibility and security. And there's also one on AI and data that maybe I'll just come back to that in a minute. Data privacy is another cross-cutting theme, and the approach to this sits somewhere in between the other 2 types of certification, in that we do offer a self-assessment rubric that any technology provider can use, but certification can only be achieved by scrutiny from our expert team. And this is an area where we have a particularly high number of vetted tools due to the value that the sector places on this. So it's a hugely important topic, very much so in Europe, but I think it's the case worldwide. And it's not always easy for education providers to assess this themselves. I was chatting to Erin earlier on before this session, and she was talking about working with institutional gatekeepers who manage security and privacy in some of the institutions she works with. But in many cases, there are a lot of tools, maybe the free-to-use tools, or maybe in higher education contexts, where use of these tools simply slips under the radar and it's not subject to any kind of formal scrutiny. It's not the institution that has to license the tools. And even when educators are aware of the risks, it's not always easy to know where to find that kind of information. It's not easy to interpret the legal verbiage around it. So we've created the rubric that covers a range of topics, including what data they're holding, their security practices, third-party interactions. It's not just what's going on in your tool, it's who else they're working with, and advertising, which is very important, particularly in schools. And we find that technology providers find this assessment every bit as useful as the end users do. Again, Erin's talked about not every technology would pass their assessment. Certainly a lot don't pass our data privacy scrutiny initially. And it's sometimes the ones that fail initially that find this even more useful. They're maybe the smaller companies who just aren't really geared up to do this themselves. They're not really sure of the expectations. So they have the opportunity to discuss the results with our experts and implement the improvements that they need. So I'm showing you, it might be quite difficult to read on the screen. They're, a very intensive set of questions looking at various aspects and clearly whether they meet the requirement or not. And that's displayed in these little traffic light charts that we show in our product directory, and that are sometimes used in the institutional dashboards as well. So why do it? I hope it's probably clear from what I've already said that there are many good reasons to get certified, but when all's said and done, tech providers are busy. It's still something else that they have to do. So what are the other factors behind providers feeling that they need to do it? And there are both intrinsic and extrinsic pressures. In some cases, there's a lot of top-down pressure where local authorities or ministries of education are demanding standards compliance. Probably the best example of this in Europe, probably the world actually, is the French government, who in December wrote their interoperability requirements for schools into law. So they've specified which standards are essential to be complied with, and there are a number of 1EdTech standards in that list. And where technology is purchased through a public procurement procedure, as it is in a lot of Europe, then the procuring authorities are increasingly requiring standards compliance as well. However, we have encountered a number of examples where the procuring body has fallen foul of this difference between compliance and certification. They've taken a technology provider at their word when they say, oh yeah, we use those standards, we're compliant. And then they found in practice that it wasn't a certified product and it didn't quite work as they expect. So I think the public sector is getting a little bit more savvy about this. And in some cases, the pressure is coming from the marketplace itself, that some of the big EdTech providers, such as D2L and Instructure, are increasingly requiring proof of standards compliance as a requirement to join their partner programs. And finally, the intrinsic motivations. I've already said that having access to the tools saves a huge amount of time and resource. But for many European providers as well, their local market isn't really big enough to sustain them. So global interoperability opens up new opportunities for them, and exposure through our dashboards and our partner dashboards is really important for them. So there's a kind of virtuous circle here linking the under the bonnet testing and certification to the visibility offered through the product directory, the links to our partners, and the ways in which institutions and teachers share information about the tools that they use amongst themselves. I said I'd mention the Trusted Apps dashboards briefly. This is something that's now very well established in the US and about to be launched in Europe. So most education providers use a range of different tools, and in the case of a large university or school district, that this could run into hundreds of different apps. Our Trusted Apps dashboards allow the members to curate the tools that they're actually using. So they can identify their preferred tools, which are likely to be the ones that they hold institutional licenses for, others which are approved in certain circumstances, or perhaps those which are even banned in their institution or in their locality. So our vetting information feeds through from the product directory, and they've got the opportunity to enter information about how they're actually using their products, for example, to put examples of good pedagogic practice into there. So we've got a very well established certification mechanism that's worked well for many years, but things don't stand still. And we're now adapting that to a world of AI-enabled tools. And I think just a couple of minutes, then maybe just say very, very briefly kind of how things are advancing and how we're working in that area. So I've said that standards are the bedrock of digital sovereignty. They've served us well for many years, and using our agreed standards that are developed by the community, it serves to address some of the issues around big tech and AI-enabled big tech being shaped outside Europe and in many cases outside education. So I've put some links there for you. I think you'll get the slides afterwards to some of the resources that we already have available. And now we're trying to go way beyond that and working to ensure that institutions can make the most of AI by allowing it to safely access learning context. And I'll give you like just a very, very brief flavor of what that involves. Because AI tools can't deliver learning impact unless they've got information about the learning context. So if you ask an AI tool a question, and it doesn't have the information it needs to answer it, what's it going to do in those circumstances? It'll either refuse to answer, give a very generic response, or hallucinate, none of which is particularly helpful. So what is learning context? We've mentioned it a few times. I think I heard Erin mention it as well. It's something that we may take for granted as educators, but it's actually something quite abstract, the who, what, when, and why behind a particular question you're trying to answer, behind a particular learning activity. And when you think about what lies behind that, it's actually pretty complicated. If you don't have that context, then you're working blind, and it's not necessarily a failure of the AI tool. It's just you're not giving it any information to work with. It's not going to function as you would expect. But what's behind it, as I say, is complicated, because the information you need to give a learner the right support at a particular moment in time might consist of fragments of data that are split across a number of different information systems. And again, it's fortunate that we're not starting from scratch, because these systems have been part of our ecosystem for many years. We've been creating data models and controlled vocabularies to support interoperability for slightly different use cases. The challenge is now to bring it together in ways that are more flexible and cross-cutting to support the new generation of tools. I've given you an indication there of the kinds of data that we're talking about, and the kind of push-pull pressure, if you imagine this happening in a learning landscape, that on one side you've got the tech providers and the apps saying we need this information to be able to do the job, and on the other hand you've got the institutions saying this is all the information we're going to allow you to have. So it's very much work in progress. We've got some resources openly available, but we're trying to engage with the community to know what the next generation of standards will be working with, and how we'll be adapting the quality assessment and the certification process. We have a European get-together, so I've taken the liberty of just popping a little advert for there. If you're interested in any of the themes that have been raised today, you'd like to meet us as a group. It's a fairly unique kind of gathering, and find out more. And finally, you have my contact details if you'd like to follow up afterwards. And I think I'm just about on time now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gill. This was another great overview, and we are so proud to be working both with 1EdTech and ISTE. It's really important that the providers of evidence and certifications are trusted, and you heard today why we trust ISTE and 1EdTech. For those of you who have been following the webinar series, just a quick reminder of how it all fits in. The trusted evidence providers are the ones to look for when you are thinking about your certifications and ensuring that you demonstrate evidence. And the edu evidence, as you know, is ensuring that we pull together all the international certifications under one umbrella to support policymakers and procurement teams. And today we heard from ISTE that falls within the effectiveness strand, and 1EdTech that falls within the ethics strand in the 5 E's nomenclature used by edu evidence. So, as Erin pointed out, when we think about the international value of this work and how the certifications align, do check how your specific evidence piece corresponds to these different certifications and how you can ensure that you are building towards a rich evidence portfolio, because that is what policymakers are looking for and procurement teams are looking for. And just like Gill and Erin mentioned, when we then pull this together, we can see which tools have been validated, which are still waiting to be validated, and which have been certified. So it's something that is a collective ecosystem effort, and we are very grateful that we can be working on this together with such trusted partners. Moving on to questions, and I thought that we'll have lots of time for them, but it looks like that we have about 15 minutes left. So let's start with the first question, which is from Beth Sanders. I'll read it out aloud, and maybe it's a question that you, Erin, would be best placed to answer first, if you don't mind. So is there a type of validation that you suggest a new platform that focuses on teacher professional learning and is specifically teacher-facing, not student-facing, should start with regarding the EdTech market validations list that you shared?
Yeah, well, hi, Beth. I know Beth. We do actually have a professional development certification for the ISTE seal. So our most common is the student-facing products, curriculum, platforms, assessment tools, creativity tools. But we also look at professional development, specifically digital andragogy. We look at, how teachers are using the professional development to have direct impact into their classrooms with their students. So we also include the ISTE standards for educators and coaches within that part of the professional development certification. So yeah, I'm happy to share about that more. We have a separate application guide and all of that too. So yeah, definitely something that's important to us. In terms of EdTech, there aren't as many professional development platforms. And that's another thing too, we're seeing a little bit of a shift in the market. Traditionally, professional development was more training. And so it was about like, train the trainer and like learning about the different programs, how to implement it, and not so much the pedagogical components of it. And so we're looking at both. We're looking at the technical applications of it, the functionality of the product, and then also how it's implemented with teachers and how they can then apply their learning. So yes, we do have that.
We also do some work in that area. I didn't talk about it today, but we run something called, as part of this Trusted Apps Suite, there's the Trusted Apps Certified Leader course, which is currently only available in the US, but we're getting demands for people to take modules in that all over. And I probably made some of this sound a little bit nerdy and technical, but our events are called Learning Impact, and that's what it's about, really. It's about reducing the friction to learning impact. It's about, yes, making sure the tools just work, but why is this important? Why is privacy important? Why is accessibility and inclusivity important? And they're the kind of topics, that we really do cover with our leaders as well, because a lot of the stuff that we test and certify is the stuff that doesn't and shouldn't matter. Just getting your product to work the way it should isn't where the value is, isn't what's really going to differentiate you in the marketplace. It's trying to take away the friction of that so that people can focus on the quality enhancement, really, and the stuff that does matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you both. I wonder whether we could perhaps speak a bit more about the international aspect of this work as well. I see that we have some attendees who I know work internationally, whether it is Sub-Saharan Africa or Asia. How can we perhaps describe the process of getting certified through 1EdTech and ISTE for partners who work in international markets outside of Global North? Or perhaps talk them through the full application process. Who would like to start? Gill, would you like to start since you're spotlighted already?
Yeah, I'm just always flying the flag for Europe, but actually we have 1EdTech LATAM, 1EdTech Canada is currently forming. We've got 1EdTech Japan, we've got 1EdTech South Korea as well. So, and we have an active community in the Middle East as well. Sorry, I'm looking at where you are on my screen. I realise I'm probably staring into the distance for the people who are looking at me.
No problem.
So, I mean, it is possible to use the tools to get the membership benefits wherever you actually are in the world. It just depends where you are as to whether there's an active community that's kind of in your time zone and doing things specifically for your part of the world.
And to become a member, what do companies need to do, Gill?
Talk to us. So just kind of fill in the contact form on our website, and then somebody will find out about what kind of company you are, what you're actually trying to achieve, what type of membership might work for you, what we can do to help. Yeah.
Perfect. And we will share those links with our attendees today. And Erin, would you like to talk us through the process? How do companies apply for the ISTE seal?
Sure. Yeah, and it's actually been really exciting with the seal. So we relaunched in 2023 using the current framework that we're using, and our current seal holders are actually 42% of them are based outside of the US. So we really are a global framework. We've used the best practices in usability and digital pedagogy, and so we're finding that companies all over the world are finding value in the framework. In terms of the process, so yeah, just as Gill said, reach out to us. You can email me directly. I'll drop my email in the chat. And we provide you all of the materials up front. You can ask us lots of questions. Once you decide to officially move forward with the process, you get me throughout the process. So I help with, getting the application together and making sure that companies are set up for success. And something that Gill mentioned earlier that I also want to mention for us too is, we're really committed to product quality improvement. This is not a one and done like pay a fee, get a seal. And that's really important to us. The framework is very involved. We want to make sure that these products are vetted. And so the first time through our review, many products don't pass. We only have about a 30% pass rate the first time through. But it's a good thing because then we give you lots of feedback, and then you can take that feedback, make improvements, talk to us, and pass and earn the seal and have a really much stronger product. And so that's one of the really important pieces that I am really proud of in this process.
I really like that. There is this constructive feedback that companies get, and then you can be improving your product until you the standard. And once companies receive the ISTE seal, then through the recertification program between EduEvidence and ISTE, you get the effectiveness bronze certification automatically. So it's a very nice partnership to ensure that we really capture all the evidence we know exists within the EdTech ecosystem and can accurately inform not only policymakers, but also the procurement teams who have to sift through so many different apps and learning platforms, all claiming that they have impact. So this is important work to ensure that we have some standards and some shared understanding of what we mean by that. So if we have no more questions, then I'll just check whether there are any last few things Erin or Gill remember that they want to share. Did you cover all the content?
I guess there's just one aspect of maybe the interactions between us that I haven't expressed, which is I didn't say much about interoperability, but there's the analytics side of things as well. And the stuff that the ISTE seal is doing is around good pedagogy and good learning design. And if you have incorporated that into your product, then you can use our analytics standards to track, is that happening as you expected? So there are there are interactions in all sorts of ways that we all we all have little bits of the puzzle and put together. It's really trying to bring the whole marketplace along really together.
Love that. Thanks very much, Gill. That's a very nice note to end on, the importance of really seeing this as a holistic ecosystem where all these pieces need to work together and create a synergy, because when you might have a tool that has great ethical practices, but if the pedagogy is not sound, then that's not really the impact in the holistic sense. And by the same token, if you have done a study that perhaps yielded positive impact on the students, you also need to make sure that the pedagogy is in place and that your interoperability standards have been followed. So it all works together, and it is this kind of rich understanding of impact that we hope to achieve in the EdTech ecosystem. So thank you for doing this work, Erin and Gill, many thanks again. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We'll be posting this on YouTube shortly. And we'll be joined next month in April by UNESCO and colleagues at Gill and at Cortex. So you have something to look forward to. We'll be sharing the details on our LinkedIn and Substack channel shortly.